Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to see so many of you. I want to review a few rules to help the flow of our conversation. First, please note that this session is being recorded and all registrants will be emailed instructions on how to access today's webinar. Next, closed captioning is also available, and to access it, just click Show Captions on the navigational bar at the bottom of your screen, then select your preferred language. And we ask that you please keep your microphone muted during our time together. There's so many of us, which is fabulous, but remaining on mute will help to eliminate background noise. If you have a comment or a question, we ask that you please use the digital raise hand feature to change your position on the screen so we can easily recognize you. But please wait to be called on before you unmute your microphone. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Zoom's raise hand feature, you just click the reaction icon at the bottom of your navigational bar of your window. And once clicked, a small screen will appear directly above that icon, and just click where it says raise hand, and your digitally raised hand will appear on the upper left of your screen. If you are using a smartphone or tablet, just touch your screen and the raise hand function will appear under the category labeled More. And to lower your hand, just repeat those previous steps. Information may be shared in the chat box during our session, and you may also be asked to enter information in the chat box. And to access that chat option, just click the chat icon on the bottom navigational bar of your Zoom window. And once clicked, a screen will appear, normally on the right-hand side. Just enter your question or comment to everyone, then click return on your keyboard. And finally, we ask that you please be patient and allow your fellow participants time to unmute their microphones when it is their turn to speak. So thank you so much for your attention and enjoy today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Does anyone have a question for Stephanie today before we get started on how to change your name, or unmute yourself, or anything that Stephanie needs your help, you need help with? All right, before we get started, we're going to ask, pray. Let us pray. Lord God, we give you thanks for an opportunity for sisters to gather in unity and to be on one accord. We ask you to be with this meeting, be with David as he shares all the information that we need to continue to be the bold Presbyterian women that we are. Lord God, we give you thanks for the seasons of change, the smell of the new flowers, and just to being in unit and connection with our sisters around the world. We ask these in your name we pray. Amen. And we will ask now Susan to bring us some greetings.
Hello, everyone. It's Susan Jackson Dowd. I serve as the Executive Director of Presbyterian Women. I am so grateful that you are here and so grateful that David is here to talk to us about PW history and how to manage it in these changing times. I get a lot of questions about what to do with PW histories, what to do now, what to do with records that you have. And David has graciously agreed to join us and to talk to us and answer questions for us. So I will be brief so that we can get on with his presentation, and there'll be time for questions at the end. I'll give David a brief introduction, Adrian, if you'd like.
Okay. All right, well, let Kathy say a few words since she's here and I might have to leave. Kathy, would you say something as our co-moderator?
Yeah, well, thank you all for taking this time on a Friday afternoon to meet with us to talk about how to help preserve our history. Each one of your groups, each one of you is a part of PW history, and we're happy that you're willing to share this time to learn how we can better keep the great story of Presbyterian women alive. So thank you for taking this time, and thank you for being awesome Presbyterian women. And I'll turn it back over to Adrian.
All right. I guess I need to introduce myself. My name is Adrian Knight, and I bring you greetings from I'm your Senate Rep, or the Senate rep from the Mid-Atlantic. And I also serve on the committee for ICC, Inclusive Community. All right, so we're going to get started because we have a lot. David has a lot to cover, and we don't want to prolong waiting for him. David has been an activist at the Presbyterian Historical Society since 2011. He grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. Do we have any Virginians here? All right. And he has a master's degree from Indiana University, Bloomington, and Kent State University. All right. He has, in 2022, he was made assistant state clerk for PCUSA. So take it away, David. And if you want to say something else about yourself, go ahead.
That's a fine introduction, moderator. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me just fine? Outstanding. I see one familiar face, Elder Alpha Brown. Glad to see you, my friend, a fellow Roanoker. I'm going to hopefully begin to answer your questions through a PowerPoint. I promise not to take more than like 20 minutes or a half an hour. I just want to get out in front of the questions that will emerge. And we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A during the course of the hour. So without further ado, I'm going to hide behind this. Yep, there we go. Excellent. So everybody sees a big black screen. Getting fantastic. So I want to make sure that I'm going to start to talk about the kinds of records that we have tended to see come in from Presbyterian women's groups from the local, the Presbyterial, and the national level. And because so many Presbyterian women pull double duty, you are a historically minded group, and many Presbyterian women tend to do double duty, both in the women's group and on session. You are in a prime position to also serve as our agents and to do work for your congregations as well. So this is going to be a kind of 50-50 kind of presentation. So I think to understand what kind of records a group might have, archivists use functional analysis. We ask first what a group does, and we learn which records document that work. At the very broadest level, Presbyterian Women makes, we ask the question of a group, what is the thing you make? At the broadest level, you make an annual gathering, right? What's pictured on the screen is an image from the 1958 United Presbyterian Women gathering at Purdue University. And that gathering is documented in part by this portrait of the delegations of women from the Synods of Atlantic and Catawba, two of the former all-Black governing bodies of the PCUSA. And so what do you do when you're gathered in this big communion? You worship, you get to know one another, and you invite prominent speakers to address the body on hot-button social issues. In our holdings, I don't think there's a single issue surrounding social justice in the PCUSA that Presbyterian women weren't out in front on first, way before General Assembly consideration or action. That includes nuclear disarmament, comfort for migrants, the struggle against the apartheid regime in South Africa. You, as women, bear prophetic witness, usually way before it's cool to do so. What's on the screen is an image from the 1985 UPW gathering, the plenary, where Martha Benavides, who was an associate and colleague of Saint Oscar Romero in El Salvador, told this group of women about American complicity in the Salvadorian regime's war on poor rural people. Benavides in 1985 tells the audience that it's their tax dollars at work supplying paramilitary death squads and the Salvadorian Air Force. And I'm quoting her, "The number of government craft is set to double in a year. We must recognize that this is a visible sign of death and oppression, the fire of the Pharaoh attacking by air with the Air Force." And Benavides urges United Presbyterian Women to support regional diplomatic efforts to end the struggle. Again, quoting her, "I beg you, I challenge you, I demand of you to join us in Central America, in South Africa, in Palestine, in the Bronx, to proclaim the time of Jubilee." So one of the things you do is you take up space in the world. You make, you make any kind of offense against our common humanity a matter before the General Assembly. And the documents you make in the case of the 1985 gathering are slides, photographs, news articles in your house organ concern, and audio cassette recordings of the proceedings, objects like banners and buttons. Similarly, you document the work of your organizations at the Presbyterial level. You publish conference proceedings, you take pictures of gatherings. Sometimes you compile published material like newsletters and newspaper clippings into scrapbooks, like the material that's pictured on the screen. And you keep minutes. Sometimes those records cover Presbyterian women's work outside of your gatherings or your ordinary business. What's pictured here are images from Presbyterian women of the Presbytery of Detroit. If you're here, shout, holler. The PW and Presbytery of Detroit in the 1920s ran its own church extension effort in Detroit's Del Rey neighborhood. At the time, Del Rey was a burgeoning industrial center. It was home to Ford's River Rouge plant, and it had one of the largest populations of recent immigrants in the whole country. Huge numbers of African Americans, Mexican Americans, Armenians, Italians, and the largest Hungarian population outside of Budapest. Really interesting place. Presbyterian women in Detroit ran a neighborhood house called the Del Rey Institute. And minutes of the Del Rey Presbyterian Institute are, as far as we can tell, the only documentation of Presbyterian work in that neighborhood in that part of the 20th century. What's especially interesting about the work of the Del Rey Neighborhood House is that it went on in conjunction with the Presbytery of Detroit's own Dodge Community House, which was a community house oriented specifically toward African Americans in the city. And what's on the screen here, sort of in the middle there, you can see that they are planning a joint meeting and a gathering at the Presbytery's camp to kind of join those two communities. So you are also the heirs of the long tradition of Presbyterian women's home and foreign missionary societies and the strongly Presbyterian inflected but interdenominational ladies' aid societies of the Civil War, all of which kept minutes. The Ladies' Aid Society of Philadelphia dedicated itself to providing supplies, medical aid, and emotional and religious support to soldiers. Nicknamed the Presbyterian Ladies' Aid Society because it held meetings and packed supplies in the basement of 10th Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia, it became one of the most famous and successful women's charitable groups during the war. Ellen Orbison Harris, the secretary of LASP, also worked in conjunction with the United States Civil Commission or the Sanitary Commission as a field correspondent, traveling to hundreds of hospitals to care for both Union and Confederate soldiers. Interestingly, the LASP kept a record of honorably discharged soldiers from 1863 through 1864. That's the panel on the left-hand side of the page, listing their reason for discharge and listing any possible sources of assistance. And so the records that these women's bodies created provide critical documentation of military service and are vastly useful for 19th century historians. On the right-hand side are minutes from the Ladies' Aid Society of West Adams Presbyterian Church this is Los Angeles, excuse me. They show contributions to seminaries abroad and to the Board of Work with Freedmen. So what's circled there is a donation to Mary Allen Seminary and the Freedmen's Board, working as late as 1920. And so like any other council of the church, you keep essential administrative records, right? minutes, bylaws, articles of incorporation. You document your work through commemorative records like photographs, narrative histories, scrapbooks. And this work is not just for you and your local and Presbyterial groups. You have an impact on society, and you have stories to tell. You make primary source records that allow us to learn about that. You are crucially agents of archives, not the subjects of archives. And current inquiry into American Presbyterianism relies on the things you've made and the things you do right now. So that's the beginning of an overview of what we know about you through our records. And I'd really like to talk more about PHS and our operations. And I usually start by answering some of the most frequently asked questions that we get. We do occasionally get asked, are you the archives in Montreat? We are not the archives in Montreat. We are the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia. We're organized in 1852. We have more than 36,000 cubic feet of original records, spanning national agencies, presbyteries and synods, personal papers, and congregations. We are your archives. One of the things that's fascinating about Presbyterianism as a religious tradition is that the maintenance of records is actually part of your faith tradition. What's on the screen is an extract from the 1789, so the very first like national book of order, including chapter 22 on clerks, saying it will be the duty for every judicatory to choose a clerk who will be able to provide extracts from the minutes. That passage in the book of order remained either chapter 20, 21, or 25 up until like it became G30107 to the present day. You are people of the book. That means the Bible, Book of Confessions, Book of Order, and Robert's Rules Revised 3rd edition. So, you know, we have no shortage of Presbyterian texts. So in your session and in your Presbyterial groups, in your local groups, the first question that we get is, I am suddenly in charge of a big body of stuff and I don't know what to do. This is common for everybody who engages with Presbyterian records. So the first task of yours is appraisal. What's on the screen is an image from a shipment that we got. I think this was 2015 or 2016. We got a call from a little church in Texas that said, look, we're 60 years old. We're coming to the end of our ministry, and we are going to ship you the entire contents of our church office. And I said, please, ma'am, don't do that. And she said, too late. It's already on Greyhound. And so what we got was something on the order of 1,500 pounds of material from this one church. And on the left-hand side, you can see there's multiple copies of the same Presbyterian Mariners newsletter. There's paid bills. There's old publications. And so what we had to focus on was identifying first the most important things to pull out of the wreckage, and then to work on the rest of the wreckage later. And so for Presbyterian women groups, for church sessions, your minutes and registers are the single most important thing that you can identify. So if you crack open if you crack open the church basement, the attic, a closet, and you see a pile of stuff, look for these essential records first. These are the kinds of things without which your organization, your church, can't really be said to have existed in the first place. The essential records that you create are going to be generally, small in extent, and they're going to be very information dense. We're looking for a 150-year-old church is probably going to have a box and a half or 2 boxes of session minutes and registers tops. The second thing that we think of as being worth preserving is a much bigger bucket, and these are commemorative records. What's on the screen is a photograph of a proud Girl Scout from Bay Ridge United Church, which was a joint Peace USA and RCA church in Brooklyn. That church closed in the 20-teens. And alongside their session minutes and registers, we brought in photographs, photograph albums, scrapbooks, newsletters. And the only documentation of their Girl Scout troop is a batch of photographs from the mid-1960s. And that is the only testimony to the kind of social impact of that church, the actions that it took outside of its own walls. And so that's why we think of this kind of material as being of permanent value. Thinking about the church outside the walls, one of the interesting things about your records is that they do not just exist for you, they exist for the whole church, and they exist to have a function in society. I'll tell you what I mean by that. What's on the screen is the discovery of the infant Moses at the Bohemian Brethren Church of Omaha, Nebraska. This church, of course, is made up of Czech-speaking immigrants to the Midwest. And it's one of the signs of the work that Presbyterians did in the early 20th century to provide a place at the table for new European migrants. And it's part of the long history of non-English speaking presbyteries and synods in this country, very few of which exist anymore. As late as the 1950s, there were, I think, still 2 Welsh presbyteries in Pennsylvania. So this was a process of, cultural adaptation that took at least half a century to shake out. And it's records like this that help us talk about that and help us remind the present church to make space for new migrants of today. So you've got one small bucket of stuff, your essential records. In Presbyterian women's case, that's chiefly going to be minutes. You have a much bigger bucket of commemorative records, photos and newsletters and scrapbooks. And then you have, especially at churches, you have a much, much, much larger panoply of records. And those are records of transactional or daily business. Bills getting paid, receipts, dismission and transfer certificates. There's all kinds of ephemeral stuff that congregations need to maintain for a certain period of time and then can dispense with or shred. We have an extensive retention schedule for congregations on our website, and I will happily put that in the chat as soon as I finish speaking. Oh, hold up. I mentioned the word shredding. So you're saying I should use paper for records keeping? Yeah, I mean, yeah, in short. The truth is, for a decade or 20 years, we've been living in a hybrid record-keeping environment, right? We've been living in an environment where we create material in digital form and where we preserve it for the very long term in paper. And we go back and forth, vice versa. I still recommend that relatively small organizations maintain essential records like your minutes in acid-free paper for a couple of reasons. One is that paper by its nature and paper records maintain traces of their own authenticity physically. When we talk about the science of figuring out if a document is authentic, that science is called diplomatics. And the things that guarantee a document's authenticity are called diplomatic traces. On the screen is a basic piece of session minutes with some significant diplomatic traces. We have a whoops, let me go right back. We have a signature by the clerk of session. We have a stamp by the presbytery. We have dates. Page numeration is another diplomatic trace. When you number the pages of your session minutes, you are you are more or less making sure that insertions can't happen surreptitiously, so that no like unscrupulous archivist of the future can jam pages in your session minutes that dedicate your church property to me and my family. One of the things that one of the other reasons why we recommend paper as a long-term preservation format for textual records is what we're trying to do over the long term is to reduce the technical dependencies between the text and the reader. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. What's on the screen is records of a church from St. Louis that had a complete run of session minutes, like 1870 to 2010-ish, except for a passage in the middle of the 1990s where their clerk decided to keep everything on floppy disks and then just stuck the floppy disks into like a vinyl sleeve inside the session minute book. And so we've introduced one technical dependency. In order to read your minutes, you have to have a floppy disk drive. We've also introduced a second technical dependency, which is the software format of the documents. It turned out that this person didn't just make like a Word perfect document or a Word document or something. They had 11 billion individual .pwp files, which is like a boutique desktop publishing format. It was just a real catastrophic situation. So what we want is a text that 100 years from now is going to be legible by anybody who can read the language, is not going to require software. It's not going to have software, hardware dependencies. It's not going to require energy to run. That is really the aim for all of the stuff that we do. Oh, wow. So I can talk a little bit about how we do digital preservation. This is my colleague, Allison Davis, operating the overhead planetary scanner that we have here. We image more than 70,000 pages of original texts and images every single year here. We store them in an online repository, which we've nicknamed Pearl. That is two pieces of software, basically. A digital repository platform that automates a lot of the processes of guaranteeing the authenticity of the stuff that's in it. And then a web-facing piece of software called Drupal. Okay, fine. What can PHS do for me? I've received your lessons, I'm ready to act. The first thing that we can do for you is we can hold original records on deposit. That means that anything you have here will be open to the public if it's more than 50 years old. We bring things into the archives, describe them briefly, put the description in a database. Anybody in the world can see our descriptions. Anybody in the world can request digitization of stuff that's open. The second thing that we can do for you, obviously, is digitization. Placing records on deposit with us is a free service. You have been paying your per capita faithfully, and so that is what gets you deposit services. Digitization, we try to make up for the costs on the back end. So we image records for any Presbyterian group at a cost of 70 cents per page. I'm going to be very brief about some of the promotional aspects of this presentation. We have in recent years been doing a better job of responding actively to the needs of the whole PCUSA, and specifically with the needs of the archives to build a more inclusive body of voices in the stacks. One of the things that we did during the protests in the wake of the murder of George Floyd was we embarked on a collection of publicly accessible pieces of video documenting Presbyterians' responses to and accompaniment with the Black Lives Matter movement. On the top left is a screen cap from the Martin Luther King Community Presbyterian Church in Springfield, Mass, which was the victim of arson. And then down on the bottom left is First Presbyterian Church of Ferguson, Missouri on Pentecost in 2020, pleading for tranquility and peace in Ferguson. We have also embarked on a dedicated body of money and staff time to more fully document the contributions of African American Presbyterians in the denomination. This is styled the African American Leaders and Congregations Initiative. And the chief thing that we're doing for historic Black churches is we are doing free digitization for them. So last year we did free imaging for 10 churches through the initiative. The biggest thing that we've embarked on over the past like 5 years, though, has been digitization of the complete records of Katie Geneva Cannon. It was Katie's will that part of her records go to Union Seminary in New York, part go to Union Seminary in Richmond, and part go here. And we dedicated ourselves to bringing in the New York and Richmond records on loan and digitizing the entire shebang. You can see all of that in Pearl. The effort was a little better than 2 years, and we imaged more than 15,000 pages of Katie's sermons, essays, reflections, photographs, and works of art. And we are still embarked on an effort to more fully document the 40-year-long struggle for marriage and ordination equality in the denomination. That effort is styled the Pam Byers Memorial Collection in honor of Pam Byers of the Covenant Network. And the most recent exciting thing that's happened on that score is we are now the repository of the original records of Morelight Presbyterians to the tune of about 40 cubic feet of Morelight stuff. That was just transferred here from Rutgers University, where it had been for about 30 years. That is an overview of some of the stuff that we do. That's an overview of some of the things that you all make. I'm going to leave this slide up on the screen in case people are taking notes for a couple of seconds. And really what I really hope is to begin to answer folks' questions.
All right,
There we
does
go.
anyone have a pressing question? Raise your hand. Well, let's see, I'll probably need some help. Or if you're shy, you can put it in our chat. All right, David, one of our questions someone said, I guess how to preserve digitally it be explained. So,
Oh, yeah.
Can you do a little more on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the truth, the second half of my passage about the virtues of paper was something that I skipped, and thank you for reminding me. The reality is everything that we make begins in a digital form, right? Like there are very few of us who are committing minutes to paper in handwriting. So we recommend like a hybrid approach. If you're a clerk of session or if you're secretary of a PW group, obviously your minutes are going to start out in Word or in a Google document or something like that. You will submit them to session or to presbytery or your own group for approval. When the minutes are approved, we recommend exporting them to PDF and then holding on to your PDF documents until you have like a big body, 200 pages, 400 pages, and compiling those documents to a single PDF file. So it'll be a single multi-page PDF file. If you don't already have the full version of Adobe Acrobat, that's a good idea for pretty much any church to purchase. And there are ways for churches to get cheap Adobe licenses. There are also pieces of freeware that allow you to split and combine and do a lot of the functions of Adobe stuff. So once you have a multi-page PDF document, that's the point at which it's a good idea to print that to acid-free paper. Also, moderator, I see in the chat, it looked like you had asked, do we need special paper? Most of the paper you're going to get from like Staples is pretty good. Like, you know, contemporary basic office paper is okay. We recommend looking for a 100% acid-free paper. There are different ways of doing that. The cheapest way is, you know, we take wood pulp paper and imbue it with chalk, typically, to reduce the pH. I have, if I can get my act together, I can also put links in the chat. But basically, yeah, you're going to keep minutes in PDF and save them whenever they're fully closed, signed and sealed. Print them to acid-free paper.
David, some of us are not all that techie, and you keep saying PDF. Why does it need to be PDF?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's no such thing as people who are generic technologically minded. There's only like technologies that you just haven't used yet.
Okay, thank you.
So a PDF document is it is portable document format. It's a you have used it if you've filed your taxes recently. So if you look up, you know, IRS 1040 forms, what you download from the IRS is a PDF file. It's PDF is designed to maintain exactly the layout of the text on the page as if it was printed. And that's the basic reason why we like PDF. Word documents, as you may have encountered in life, open in an editable mode. So that means when they're open, you can fiddle with them. PDFs open in a read-only mode. So when you're looking at them, you're not fiddling with them. That's pretty much why we rely on PDF. In case anybody wonders, especially because I was talking about software dependencies, PDF is an open source format. That means the people who wrote the software have published its source code, and that means that anybody who knows how to fiddle with this stuff can also write programs that use PDF as a standard. That's why you can export from Word to PDF. That's why you can go to Google Chrome and save a web page in its layout as PDF.
Okay. All
David,
right.
got a question from Kathy Needhouse.
Right on, Kathy.
Okay. Well, I'm discouraged a little bit because I really want to throw all these minutes out. I'm just trying. I'm a genealogist, so I understand the value of all these things, but I also have to deal with the paperwork. So you're saying we should really not throw any of our minutes out. We should make PDFs out of them or whatever then, just because there might be some value in the future.
Your minutes we think of as being of permanent value.
Okay. I don't, I have a hard time with that, but that's okay. We can do that. But how about financial stuff? Do you think the financial stuff needs to be hung on to unless we make some significant donation to something or other?
No, I mean the largest single part of any organization's records that needs to be addressed is your financial transactions. I would recommend following our records retention schedule, which is on the website.
Okay. We're going to get that, so I'll look at that.
So your kind of ballpark is most records of financial transactions you need to hold on to for 7 years, because that's the period during which you can be audited, right? And so after that period, they can go.
Okay, so 7 years is all we'd have to do for that then.
by and large, but we have a whole panoply of
Yeah.
different categories of things and the time period that you need to keep them for.
Okay, I get that. And I think that's pretty much, I know that I've gone through some of our Presbyterian women at the Presbyterian level. I looked at the box and got a headache immediately because I'm have to go through with my Presbyterian. I'll look at your stuff too, but so much of it looks like stuff that nobody's ever going to look through. But it sounds like if we have a yearly gathering, we should save maybe the program for that, not program, but you know what I mean, the information from that, things like that.
Yeah, you should do things that so the broadest possible piece of advice we can give is you should do things that are going to continue to serve the mission of your group, right?
Okay.
That's the whole reason why we keep minutes, so that we can, compare what we're doing to the stuff that we just finished doing, right?
Okay, then I'll put my matches away. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we go to, I think Sharon had a hand up. Does the Presbyterian Historical Society now have records that originally were part of the old PCUS records? I think
Yeah.
they were moved to Philly. Are there any PW records in that group?
Yes and yes, with a couple of additional clarifications. So we are the last portion of Presbyterian reunion to finally happen. From 1983 until 2003, the PCUSA operated 2 church archives. This shop in Philly and the Historical Foundation in Montreat, North Carolina. The assembly moved to consolidate operations in 2003, and between 03 and 07, we did a lot of work to consolidate operations here. We brought in about 5,000 cubic feet of archival material from Montreat. And at that point, because congregations, presbyteries, and synods, their records are held on deposit. We don't own them. We offered all of those groups the opportunity to either get their stuff back or have it sent to another Presbyterian affiliated repository. So a lot of congregations and presbyteries put records at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia. Columbia has an extensive collection of PW annual histories, which it still has in the black vinyl binders that they had up in Montreat. And we have select Southern Church PW records almost exclusively at the presbytery level. And many of those are less the annual histories and more the original minutes of the groups, any of their subunits, and then scrapbooks, like a pretty extensive amount of scrapbooks from Southern PW.
Any guidance on our financial records? I think you touched on that with Kathy, but there was another question that came up. So they should go to the Historical Society.
No, we really don't serve financial records of almost anybody. I'm going to get a couple of things into the chat real quick, okay?
Okay. And then can I go ahead and ask you another
Oh,
question?
absolutely.
We moved our minutes and treasury reports to the cloud, mostly in Word, some PDF. Is that okay?
You're going to want to take, I think, again, our recommendation would be to, at some point, get all of your contents, regardless of how they started, get them into PDF. And then once you have a big body of pages in a PDF, the cheapest steady state carrier of text for the long term is paper. It's a format where you can set it on the shelf and 100 years later absolutely be able to read it. And so that really is like the standard that we're shooting for. One of the other challenges in working with small groups, and I'm going to use a small group of archivists as an example, is just maintaining control over documents that are stored remotely when you have turnover in leadership. So I served on the Delaware Valley Archivists group for a number of years. And we don't have a consistent run of our own minutes. And this is a group of archivists. You would think we would have our act together, but we largely don't have a consistent run of minutes because every secretary is fresh every single year, and everybody starts up a separate Google document stored in a separate Google Drive. And we have never taken the time to just compile and unite those things. So compilation and collation is something that I think is important, and being able to read your stuff in 20 years from now is also important. I'm not trying to diminish the significance of the age that we live in. Look, there's no substitute for in terms of access for digital records. Digital content is great for distributing something en masse across the globe. Digital formats are just less suited for preserving one bit of text, a small piece of information, for a very long period of time, like 100 years.
All right, David. How do you convert 200 individual PDF documents into one? Are there some instructions out there on the website how to do this? And
well, we don't have instructions on our website, but there are instructions out in the world, I would say. Basically, if you have all of your documents open in Adobe Acrobat, you hit Combine Files, and it will organize the files, put them in order, and create a single PDF document.
Hi, David and Adrian. This is Steph. I had placed in the chat that everyone will receive a follow-up email with instructions on technical things like that. So no worries. We've got you covered.
All right. Well, thank you,
Good.
Stephanie. All right. We have a half a dozen thumb drives with mixed church stuff on them. Do we need to print those documents before sending them? And then our next question, who do we send? What do we send to you? Okay, I guess that's another.
So, yeah, to go all the way back, like the most important thing you can do is make sure that you're only preserving for the long term content that should be preserved for the long term. So I think it's Anne in the chat. Yeah, Anne, you're gonna have to take a look and figure out exactly what you mean by church stuff. That's for starters. Your other point though, so like there are kinds of content that are not meaningful when you print them, right? There's no way that you're going to print a video of a church worship service. You're not going to print an audio recording, right? Technically you can, but not in a real way that's useful. So there are, occasionally we will bring in, alongside the original minutes and registers of a church, or alongside the essential records of an organization, we will also bring in documentation that is born digital and can only exist born digital. And so occasionally that includes, videos and audio of worship services or an anniversary service, the installation of a pastor. But that kind of intake is a little rare. I guess, and the best thing I can offer to you is please email me and let's talk about it.
Okay. All right. All right. PW Records Younger Than 50 Years Guidance on How to Preserve and Store. Is there an acid-free box?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the best, again, to back all the way out, the most important thing you can do for your material is to make sure it's in a place that human beings would find comfortable, right? So you don't want it in an attic, you don't want it in a basement. You want to avoid exposure to water, light, and heat. you know, an ideal form of storage that everybody seems to have is the back of a closet. That is incredibly secure. For the records, so if you have, you know, a whole batch of session minute books, an acid-free box is going, some kind of box is going to help protect those records from accumulating dust, or if they are exposed to water, the box will be damaged before the text block is damaged. That's kind of what we're trying to set up. We're trying to set up like a bunch of barriers just in case something bad happens. A lot of people rely on fireproof safes. And in my personal opinion, the records are more frequently damaged by water than by fire. And even in the case, I've seen enough instances where people keep things in a fireproof safe in a basement, and the basement floods, and the last thing to get the water removed from it is the fireproof safe because it's not waterproof. So keep it simple. Think about, you know, the back of a closet. Think about putting stuff in a cardboard box, and that's going to get you most of the way there. If you get acid-free folders for your paper and acid-free boxes for those acid-free folders, that is a step further advanced.
Okay. Kathy, I guess the paper plus the PDF documents, you were talking about the burn ups. So they just shared that information with you about paper does burn up, as many of the geological records have in 1890 census. So that's what's Kathy. What do you recommend about scrapbooks? We have plenty, you know, Presbyterian women like to take pictures. So
yeah, you know, we think of scrapbooks as being of permanent value, and I think that if you are making things that help you serve your mission, if they help you to interpret what you do to other people, you should continue to do that thing. That said, there's another kind of balancing act with how easy it is to just produce anything at any time. Sometimes when congregations contact us and say they have a batch of stuff, you know, minutes, registers, newsletters, photographs, what do we do with the photographs? Our guidance is really, you know, there's going to be some negotiation between the present and the past. We think of, like, basically, we think of the older a photograph is, the more valuable it is to us, just because it has become progressively easier to make photographs as time has gone on, right? So like you know, about 1900 panorama of a women's group in front of the church would be extremely valuable. At the other end of the scale, like 3 whole photo albums of the same church picnic from the 1990s would be the kind of thing that we can't serve all of that. And so that's where you kind of have to select the best content out and preserve that. I think scrapbooks are a great way of selecting out the best content that you have and showing it to people.
all right, David, you shared this before. If preserved on paper, why does it have to be a PDF? I think you shared that, but once again, about.
Oh yeah, well, we've talked about why the format is recommended, and really, you know, why do both things at once? Is because digital records are really great if you want to share them widely, right? So if you have a PDF document, you can publish it on a website, you can pass it along to people by email. It's meant to be shared. Also, all of the work that you do is starting life on a computer anyway. And so continuing its life in digital format is just an extension of how it was made.
Alice, Catherine, we talked about scrapbooks. Do you need some other information? please open your mic. You,
Everybody. No, I don't, but I just would like to recommend that you keep everything in the scrapbook, and even if you dismantle the pages, it's very important to take Scotch tape and glue and mucilage off of all pictures as much as you can. It's important to handle them with latex gloves. All those things are important, but in my experience with scrapbooks, first I had to deal with someone who said, "Oh, we don't need those cards, we are going to throw them away." And I said, "No way, we are keeping everything." And when you keep everything, you have a sense exactly of what happened. Now, I hear, David, when you say that, the 3 albums on the picnic, on the church picnic, yes, you can deduplicate and you can choose the best content, but sometimes you have to be very careful with those older scrapbooks and keep everything, because every little piece of information, even a return envelope with an address, can be very important for the historian later on.
Sure, Alice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of what I'm talking about has to do with the kinds of material that we conserve as the National Archives, the PCUSA. And so a local group with a very local scope is going to be able to go way deeper
Right.
than we're able to serve. That's a very good point.
If I may, David, I have one more question. Does PHA, Presbyterian PHS Society, do you have new microfilm equipment than the ones you had 20 years ago? Have you modernized those?
So yeah, we have digital microfilm readers. So
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you microfilm church documents. Church sends you their documents to microfilm.
Oh no.
How?
Yeah, we stopped shooting microfilm a little more than 10 years ago. So like I said at the beginning, we have a extensive digitization operation, and we
Very
scan
good.
things.
Okay. So if we send you stuff, we have, I think, 20 years of stuff to send you. You will digitize it for us.
Yes, we do that. That carries a cost. We do that at 70 cents per page.
Okay, and what okay, so I have to make a note of that. And what do you recommend we do with the old microfilms? Just keep them, they keep forever?
Yeah, I mean they'll be shelf stable for more than 100 years. If you have you can churches can either get their old stuff imaged afresh, and that way you'll have higher resolution and you'll have full color. Or you can use your microfilm and just ship that off to a vendor who will convert it to multi-page PDF documents. That's also an option.
You used to
Alice?
do that for free for us. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
We did
I was
not do
just
that for free. Sorry.
Not anymore. Okay.
We
good to-
never have done that for free. That's always been paid, just because microfilm is excruciatingly expensive.
Alice, was your question, have SSDs been discussed? Was that you?
That was me, yes.
Yeah, what were you thinking about with solid state drives?
If you, that was for whoever had a question about why do we need PDFs? And if you save your PDFs on solid state drives, they will last a lot longer than if you save them on a regular USB or even external book. And I just recently learned about that, and I'm glad I did, because now I bought my, well, it's plugged in, I can't show it, but my SSD external book for the church records, and I save everything there now. It's more stable, and so I was wondering if you had any recommendations for that.
Um, so a couple, I think you're exactly right. The things that we want people to kind of get away from, and I don't think anybody really does this anymore, but we want folks to get away from storing things on optical media. So CDs and DVDs, we've discovered, have extremely variable shelf life.
Yeah.
sometimes, and the Library of Congress has done like extensive experimentation into what the shelf life of a DVD actually is. And they've discovered that there's almost no way to tell. They've examined DVDs from the same factory and from the same batch produced on the same day, and they respond, differently in the lab environment, just produced within the same day. So avoid optical media, and an external USB drive, like a big one, like a 0.5 terabyte drive. Those tend to be very stable. Small thumb drives that you pull in, pull out, pull in, pull out, remove frequently, get lost in your backpack. Those are, the more times you do reads and writes on those, the likelier they are to get corrupt. All of this, I mean, I would couch in terms of like all forms of storage, like steady state storage that we've made in the last 10 years are better and more long lived than the storage that we made 10 years ago. And backing all the way back out, what we recommend, if you want to hold on to, digital video, digital audio, is keep it in more than one place. And basically everybody's computers are set up to do this natively. But you're going to want to keep your content in at least your local desktop and some kind of cloud storage. If you're a Mac user, that's going to be your laptop and iCloud. If you're a Microsoft user, it's going to be your laptop and OneDrive, and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
All
Sure.
right. We have a statement from Tara.
Mhm.
That the SSDs and hard drives are meant to be powered on. Don't put them in the closet for 10 years and will lose data if they're not powered on for long periods of time. All right. Anyone else with a question that's not in my chat that they have a burning question? All right, Helen, I see you have your hand up. Unmute yourself and tell us what you need. David is here.
I guess I'm confused. I am a moderator of a Presbyterian PW, and I don't know at what point we send things on, and does everything have to be changed over to a PDF file? I have records going back to 1983. But at some point, they're not going to be kept with me anymore because I won't be here, and they'll be moved to somewhere else. And I'm confused.
Okay, Helen. You do not by any means have to retrospectively convert stuff that already exists. So if you have your minutes in paper, what you should concern yourself with preserving is the original records in their original form. So that's fine. If your Presbyterian PW wants to use us as their repository, I would send us only material that you don't look at frequently anymore. So if you have a big run of minutes, from like 1970 to 1990, but you find that you keep looking at 1995, then you're going to want to hold on to 95, right? You're shaking your head like it all can go. So yeah, in that case, if you're not looking at this stuff frequently, we'd be happy to serve. We would set up a deposit agreement with your Presbyterian PW group. And that would mean, that would just codify the relationship between us so we know what we expect of one another. You're going to want to look for your minutes, first of all. Very often Presbyterian PWs have not just like minutes of the whole body, you might have an executive council as well. I don't know if I've seen anybody who has like a separate trustees, but anyway, if you have a separate executive council or a separate trustees and they keep minutes, those are permanent as well. And then all the other stuff that we've talked about, if you have documentation of your annual gathering, if you have scrapbooks, those are also welcome.
Does that help you, Helen?
I think so.
You think so? All right.
Okay.
This is a lot to take in, David. All right. The wheels are
No, y'all are
turning.
great. Y'all are
and
doing
then-
awesome.
And then we need to probably pass out some aspirins, because after all of this, we're like, oh no, what do I?
Oh
Yes,
no, come
I
on.
see Janet. Okay, we're gonna. Do we have any other questions?
Adrian, this is Susan. I've got just a request of David that maybe it'll help folks. Could you just summarize quickly, David? I think you've said it throughout the presentation, but summarize the type of materials to save and the type of materials that folks can recycle and not have to worry about preserving.
Sure. The most essential things are, for Presbyterian women, your minutes. After that, other commemorative records, scrapbooks, newsletters, like proceedings of your annual gathering. The things that you do not need to save are chiefly transactional things like financial records, receipts from the caterer at your annual gathering, that kind of thing. And so that's where the retention schedule that we have is going to give you some guidance. But the simplest possible way of addressing it is hang on to minutes and like your histories and scrapbooks, and ditch financial stuff once the time is right.
David, I have a question. You were talking about the Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat full program. If we were to purchase those, there seem to be a lot of different ones. How do we know, or what's the better one to get for basically, doing documents and combining, as you were saying, the 200 documents into one big one? What type of Adobe Acrobat program do we need to get?
Barbara, I think that's a great question for email, because I would have to look at Adobe's website and tell you. The program that I have is Adobe Acrobat Pro. There are also pieces of freeware online that will let you do many of the same things. But if you have a specific question about software, please just email it to me.
All right. Stephanie, could you put David's email address in the chat again for us, please, if you can? All right. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, if
Mm.
if I may, David, this is a little. Are you ready for the question?
Yes.
Okay, it's a follow-up question on keeping financial records. I have asked our financial secretary, she has a better title than that, but I've asked her to keep track of all the memorials. And because I like, as a church historian, I like to record all of the memorials, and we have a record of the older memorials. We don't publish the names of the persons who have given or the amounts that have been given, but the memorials honoring such and such person, we like to keep track of it. And she told me that she cannot keep them because of privacy laws or something like that. So what is your take on it, and how can I discuss that with her if it's appropriate to keep those?
I honestly, Alice Catherine, I am not sure I can weigh in on that.
Okay.
I know that Presbyterian congregations very often record memorials in like a memorial book that just says in memoriam on the outside, and it has like the name of the decorative window or the pew or whatever, and then the name of the donor. And for my part, I don't think that a record that has a person's name in it is automatically a privacy violation. But I can't really attest to what your financial professional is concerned about. I'm sorry, I'm not
Yeah,
helpful
okay,
too.
I'll pursue that with her. We have enough lawyers in the church, I can ask them.
No
But
mercy.
see, we had a wonderful memorial book until the 1980s, and when everything went digital, then it went by the wayside.
I
And we've
see.
lost a lot of stuff. And I have a feeling maybe she doesn't, it's part of, I don't have to keep the financial records, and so everything else, even some memorials that need to be kept are not being kept. So I will ask her again, but thank you for your
Okay.
answer.
I'm sorry I'm not more help.
No, that's okay. That it's probably a lawyer's question anyway.
Okay, David, there's a question. Is there any value for Presbyterian PWs to collect information from the churches? What mission they support or other information about their actions? We have a form made up many years ago. Is there any value in doing this, or do we want the original documents from individual churches and individual PW groups? All right.
So Karen, I think you're talking about like compiling an annual history or some kind of or like the statistical reporting that some PW groups do. If you're on the chat, if you're
Yes.
available and accessible, just talk to me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Oh, okay. We have had a forum forever in Pennsylvania where the women fill out their historical form, and it's for the church and or for the groups. You never know. Many of our groups are very small, Eastern Kentucky and stuff. But is there any value? Like, what missions did they support? What, how often do they meet? What are their officers? That kind of thing. Is there any value for you for us to do that? And then we can evaluate whether there's really value for us, because it's a lot of, and we don't get a lot of response, less and less, and our churches have dwindled anyway, but we have a form that's
I hear you.
best I can do.
I got it. So, one of the most common things that PW groups have created is that annual history that you
Right.
have a template for. Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur still collects annual histories from PW at the congregation level. Over the past maybe 5 years, the production of PW histories at the congregational level has really dropped off. And I think it is, it's not my job to weigh in on whether that's a valid exercise of your time, first of all. That I think is up to PW at the, broadly speaking, at the highest level. What are you charging local groups with doing? What are the kinds of things that you can gather that are going to contribute to a sense of mission? How are your records useful in interpreting your work to other people and telling them, what PWs are about, right? But as far as like, should you continue to use the same template and send it to a different place? I don't really have a position on that.
But for us, say we compile an annual report from the churches we've got a sheet of paper. Is there any value for us to do anything with that? Because it's not original documents from the churches. Or not for anybody but us, I guess.
I think that, and I said this earlier in the talk, I think that you should create and preserve records that document and interpret your mission. And if you find that your checklist, rubric, form thing doesn't serve your work, then it doesn't serve your work.
Don't do it.
You can move on.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. The only other thing that I would say is you should always keep minutes.
Yeah, we do.
There you go. And make sure your minutes are permanent.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Is there anyone else?
I would just like to add a short comment. When I wrote the bicentennial history of our church last year, I realized that it was the women of the church who had started the tradition of writing the historical annual church reports, and the women's groups were always included in the church reports overall. And that went until the 1980s when PW, after the reunification of the two churches, and when PW came about, then we started the tradition of having the separate PW annual reports. But since it's usually the same person in the church who does the church-wide report and the PW report, then there's a little bit of an overlap there. And my question, I'm so glad to hear Karen comment on that, because I have been asking myself the same question.
Okay, anyone else? Let me see. Any hands up that I can't see? Let me go to the next page. Any burning desires to share for David? All right. Okay, all right, is there a template for the annual history report that someone could provide with me? All right, Reed Campbell is looking for a template.
Reed, I do not have a template for you. That's kind of a internal to y'all question.
Okay, Susan is going to answer or share.
Yeah, there is a template, an old template actually, that we have in the office that we can provide in the email. It's been used so differently across the organization. You know how PW groups across the US do things in their way. But I think we have something basic that we could share that might be helpful. Some of you have been using these. I received some of them. I think Alice Catherine has sent some to me. So we're happy to send something out that could serve as a template.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Anyone else? Okay, well, it's almost 4:30. David, do you have any last words for us?
I do not. I mean, only a word of encouragement. This is the single largest gathering of any kind that I've been a part of to try to promote PHS and our work, and I'm really gratified by like how you are demonstrating enthusiasm for maintenance of the historic record. So I mean, just thank y'all so much for having us.
Make it an annual occurrence.
All right, we will do that. All right, Stephanie,
Easily
do you have
done.
any last words for us?
Just a reminder that for everyone who registered, you will be receiving a follow-up email containing how to access the recording for today and to answer some of the technical questions that have been asked and also with the contact information for PW and for David. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Susan, do you have some last words?
I always have a word of some
All
sort.
right, okay. Don't forget to invite them.
My deep appreciation for folks being here. I agree with David. I love that PW is interested in preserving the history, telling the story of the organization. It's so critical that we continue to do that because we're telling the story of the organization, but as David has said, we're telling the story of the church. And yes, of course, an invitation. Please do come to the church-wide gathering of Presbyterian women in August in St. Louis, where there will be workshops by Nancy Taylor, I believe, David, on history. There'll be 2 history workshops provided. There will be a booth that folks can visit and talk to an archivist in person about your questions and concerns and all of that. So we hope to keep, as requested, the conversation about history going and providing the resources that you need to do the work. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. And on behalf of my committee, I would like to say thank you too, and go and be bold. Be the bold Presbyterian women that we can be. See everyone in St. Louis at Churchwide. Don't forget, do drop by and say hello to the inside the booth. Say, Adrian, I saw you. Well, you didn't really see me. But anyway, come by and see me and check me out. I might even have on a bluebird costume. All righty. Go and go peace and enjoy your weekend, ladies. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much, David. This was great.
Bye, y'all.
Really appreciate your knowledge.
Bye, Elder Alpha, if you're still there.
Goodbye. I came in late, but it was very interesting things that I wrote down.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
And write down questions to bring to St. Louis.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Stephanie and Susan.